Welcome to Builders, the podcast for leaders who want to build great companies. I'm your host, Alex Snyder, strategic advisor to world-class builders. This podcast dives into the wild rides and personal transformations that come with pursuing big dreams and becoming a leader who builds incredible teams and companies. Each episode, I'm joined by a guest who helps deliver a fresh perspective designed to leave you feeling less lonely, more connected to innovative ideas, and inspired about growing your business your way. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite channel, leave us a 5-star review, and share your favorite episode with a friend. The podcast is sponsored by Alex Snyder Advisory. If you are a business leader or executive team ready to take your leadership and company to the next level with a high-performing team, we'd love to see how we can rocket fuel your growth. Check out the show notes to book your free Builders Business Booster call, where you'll receive a strategic leadership audit and 3 concrete focus areas to mature and grow your business. All right, thanks for tuning in. Let's build. Welcome, Daphne. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited. You and I have, say, one of the more bizarrely serendipitous origin stories. It was probably 8 years ago. I walked into a pop-up shop in London, England. You were temporarily helping out very randomly. And we just did the very Canadian thing of like politely chatting. And somehow we have ended up staying in touch ever since then. I think we've both built and grown startups. Our companies collaborated. You became a client when I started my business. We've seen each other go through some pretty exciting phases. So I'm really thrilled to have you with me here today. Thank you. And I just want to let you start introducing yourself, telling a little bit about your story, and then we can get stuck in.
Oh, it's so fun to be here. When you had the podcast series launched, I was like, we should have a chat. My name's Daphne. I founded Serotina about 7 years ago. I think when I met you a couple months later when the company came to fruition. So yeah, outwardly my title is managing director, but I'm also the founder. I came into this serendipitously, and if you would have asked me if this would have been my trajectory, I couldn't have told you that, but I'm so grateful and I absolutely love what I do. So here we are.
I love it. And I think that is a very common thread amongst my guests on this series. So let's jump in with, I always to make sure that we're all on the same page. And of course, social media is hard not to know these days, but Serotina is a social media marketing or social-led marketing agency. So what is that?
Yeah, great question. I always like to say everyone has an opinion about social, personally and professionally, and oftentimes those bleed together. So what we do is we are a social media marketing agency. More specifically, we help SMEs, so small to medium-sized businesses, leverage social media in order for their brand or business that will become a brand in working with us, or an existing brand that needs a bit re-energization, in order for it to drive their business growth. So what we do is we leverage social media and we translate our efforts into metrics that show how it's affecting your business. Now, we all know with organic social media, which is most of what we offer, you can't go one-to-one sales, but what we can do is go one-to-one to brand and business metrics that correlate to sales growth or equity growth. So that's what we do. That's the fun we have. And that will take our expertise into strategy, content post-production, content creation, full-blown calendar creation and management. And then the fun stuff, what I think is the reporting and insights, just like the really rich part of what we do in order to continuously optimize, change, reevaluate the content we're putting out there on behalf of these corporations or brands.
I love it. I'm a data and analytics freak. I love that you're bringing what a lot of people see as a fun place to doom scroll into that realm of what I always say, which is what gets measured gets managed, right? Like, it's so challenging to understand what's happening unless you can somehow metricize and measure and quantify it. I love that. What first moved you to social media? Because you're pretty early.
Yeah, it's a long story, but if I take the short version, I studied microbiology at immunology university. I knew my first semester it was not for me, but I was really proud to get into this program that was really sought after. So I completed it in 4 years, and I'm like, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. I don't want to go into pharmaceutical because this chapter is now done. What do I do? So I actually had an opportunity at an e-com company, and I had the privilege of going right to the president, like within almost 6 months of my career. And for an e-com company, there's a Shopify, there's a social media, there's paid ads, there's inventory. I got such a breadth of what digital means at such a young age. And we reached the end of the road together, and he's now still a mentor. And then I was like, what am I going to do now? How do I decide what I want for myself? So I actually started to do the study for the GMAT because I was looking to do my MBA, which I know you have. And through that, I needed to make some money on the side. And I started doing social media freelancing through my university career. I had a fashion blog and my Instagram account, but it was really for fun. Full transparency, I tried to monetize it. And I was like, this is going to take forever and I need money now. So as a result, freelancing for social, I could actually pay my bills right now. And then when I wrote the GMAT, both my parents are entrepreneurs. And when I wrote the GMAT, I actually needed tax numbers. And I'm all or nothing. So I was like, I'm not just going to get sales tax numbers. I'm going to incorporate. And then 7 years later, and we're a full-blown agency.
I love that.
Yeah.
So they do say like necessity is the mother of innovation, right?
Yeah, totally.
I think you shared a little bit about this in what you just spoke about, but when did you decide to make this not just a business, but build it into an agency and freelancing to, no, I have a mission and a purpose. I'm going to bring other people in.
Yeah.
What was that point for you?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Montreal and I started the company there, and I was working with very small businesses at the time myself, and I had a couple contractors support me. And then my romantic partner wanted to start his career in an Anglophone market. And I was like, I'm down for a change. So we chose to move to Toronto together. And then I bought the business here, like quite naively. And I had the opportunity, and I love networking. I love meeting people personally, professionally. And I got some early win moving to Toronto. And I was like, oh, wow, I have a real opportunity to have an impact and also make some serious money. That was the best decision I ever made for myself personally and professionally. And it's just taken on its own shape and form as a result of that. So yeah, moving to Toronto was really when this really took shape.
Amazing. So we're always talking about entrepreneurship being a pretty wild ride on this podcast. And I'm wondering if you could maybe share with us some of the biggest hurdles or inflection points in your entrepreneurial journey, expanding Serotina in general.
Yeah. I don't know how much of them I could share publicly. Like, I really believe in honest entrepreneurship, but I do know as like a young female and a young business, we really have to be mindful of what we put out there because we're not given the same lens as everyone else, but which I've had to learn the hard way.
I was going to say that in itself is a lesson, and you can frame the lesson without the details. It's always like another story, but
totally. Well, naivety is bliss. I don't think I knew the responsibility or the opportunity I took on when I really turned this into an agency, and I'm super grateful for it. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned is like how resilient I am, and also I do believe I really have a empathetic approach to some of the conflicts that happen. And I think one thing at Serotina that does really well is collaboration internally and externally, which people wouldn't think of because we're a fully remote agency. Yes, we do have to be in person for some clients, but we were remote pre-COVID. And so this concept of collaboration started internally, but now as we work with different clients or agencies or strategic partnerships, and there's different individuals at the table, we really have this approach of we're the best at our respective things, and that's the way we're going to get the best results together. Just staying true to myself, and then the community, the vibe that we've created as a company. I think are the two things that through it all, if you keep consistent to that, you'll be okay and you'll get through it. But if you start to compromise on your values, that's when things get really, because now it's internally for you, not just externally. But if you operate from your values externally, then you did what you felt was right at the time. And you can't always control how it was perceived. But as long as you stand there, then you'll be good.
I love that.
Yeah.
Having worked together, I'm such a big proponent of understanding your values and understanding your North Star to be able to make decisions in line with both of those things and efficiently and manage your energy as an entrepreneur. Because there's always so many things coming at you that those will keep you on the straight and narrow. So I was actually going to ask you about, I know Serotina was built remotely pre-pandemic. Another thing you and I have in common, I was also not, our business wasn't remote, but I was working remotely and nomadically before the pandemic. So we believed in something, went out and tested it, and we're like, yeah, that worked. How did you make that decision? What have been the advantages and the challenges? And maybe even just speaking to what are the essentials of building what you just talked about, which is a remote collaborative culture?
Totally. I couldn't afford it. When I first started the agency, I obviously wanted the biggest, nicest office on the corner of René Lévesque and Donald Tang in Montreal. That was even the WeWork at the time, that was out of budget. So I was like, and again, I'm like, if I can get the best thing, I'm going to create the best thing I can. And that was remote working. And Google Work was Google, I forget what it was called before it became the product it is now, Google Workplace. That's where it came from. And I had to then take the investment, which would have been a lease at the time, and put it into teammates that could do better work than I could in the respective needs of the business, which I could talk about all day, how I'm not the best at how we have the extras on the team for a reason. So that's how it started. And then I came to appreciate how much working with collaborators enjoyed that. And then I realized if we maintain, and then again, with other people that came onto the team with me, really helped me shape this. And some of it was really their leadership over mine. But if we maintain really strong boundaries around what is appropriate for working hours and what isn't, what is actually an emergency and what isn't, we manage social media. We're not doing brain surgery. And if we're really clear on when they need to be available or what the timelines are, and we make sure that there's safe space to speak, if we just continuously take those 4 factors and shape remote working around that, we'll be set up for success. That's currently what we do. I will say at our current size, it's probably more manageable. I could see how with continuous growth, it might get harder. I do envision a collective space, whether through some of our partnerships that we have created. I do really see the value in working in person, developing relationships in person, but I don't think it has to be one or the other. And that's what I'm striving to achieve.
Yeah, I love that. And that's definitely something I've seen through my network, through my clients, is this continual evolution and testing of working models, particularly in relation to remote, hybrid, etc. You mentioned something that I would love to touch on more, which I think is a fundamental of leadership, which was not being the best at everything. I all wish that we were the panacea and we were just the best at everything and could handle everything, right? But
All the time.
I love sports as an analogy because sports requires a variety of different skills, typically, even in the ones that are the most similar. But many sports, anything that's team, people have different strengths, people have slightly different roles, and there are set plays, right? Of it's going to go from this person setting that up, and then that person's going to set that person up to score the goal.
Yeah.
But it's the team's goal, right? So I love sports for that type of analogy. Can you speak to just what you've learned about that as you've grown your leadership, and maybe also what's it been like learning the non-marketing, non-social media components of the business? I think that's something I see as the biggest. It's often the first hurdle, right? Like you're already good enough to do something that you can afford, or you need other people to come in and start doing the work. But actually running a business is a whole other kettle of fish.
Yeah, I think it's 2 parts to that. My whole life, again, this thing is titled how my learning disability as my superpower. But my whole life, when I was in grade 2, I couldn't read. And my teachers were like, this is abnormal. My parents were like, oh my goodness, what does this mean? And again, they went to worst case scenario. But from that point forward, I've always had a different framework to work from and been very aware of my strengths and weaknesses from like academic, performic, or professional environment, right? Like in how you write, how you read, how you communicate. I've always been aware that I wasn't the same as everybody else, which is like a huge generalization. So I think from there, I've always been really conscious of what my vulnerabilities are or where I need support. I think it's a better way to put it. So when I started the company, I knew, and I made tons of mistakes. When I was the only realtor in the company, like I made typos in titles for big publications. Like I'd made the mistake. So I think when I started to learn was like, hey, how early on, what can I layer in that makes this the best product and helps me mitigate mistakes around my vulnerabilities. So that's where it started. It was very much from a tactical and execution perspective in terms of the actual deliverables we were making. So social content, social posts, graphic design, copywriting, you name it. And then, so that I got to chip away at all of that through the way I built a business because I knew I wasn't the best at that. And I knew there was always this risk that there would be a mistake or something that wasn't well received. Again, like a typo or grammatically incorrect. I literally can't wrap my brain around that. So that was where it started. But I think where it got, and that was more familiar for me. But when it got really challenging with like, again, when my role really became to manage the business and the entity of this agency, then it was skill sets that weren't, like I was studying immunology, microbiology and immunology. There was no business classes. There was no accounting classes. I didn't know what a T&L report was. I didn't know what a balance sheet was. I didn't know how it was related or what they were. Like, I didn't know what cash flow was. I didn't know any of these things. So when I started to learn, that's when I was like, oh, these are things I don't know and don't know my understanding of and my risk with. Like I couldn't.
You don't know.
It was harder. Yeah, that was harder for me to identify because it was different material that like written comprehension. I always knew I could. That was not my strength. Numbers were always my strength. I was really good in applied science. So that's when it became harder for me to identify what to pass off. But what I've always known it takes me about time and effort to do work that compared to the average person. Again, a huge generalization, but that's the framework I was brought up in. So that helps me gauge the one thing that we all don't have enough of this time. So if this can be done better, more effectively by someone else, that's been now how I learned to delegate some of the things that I already know I shouldn't be doing. So yeah, I hope that answers your question or like, it's light on the framework I use to help me. I'm not saying it's easy and never mind the emotional aspect. Like, I'm just talking about like hard skills, like, or never mind the emotional aspect being like, oh wait, it's time to hand this off to someone, even though I've been the only one to do it so far, like with our side, like financing, projection, but HR decisions. Now we're coming to a place where I'm not really the best person to make those decisions for the company, even though I am the owner of the company.
Or you may be making the decision, but not the one to be doing the analysis to set up the decision, right?
Correct. Ultimately, it is me who owns that decision. Yeah, correct.
Thank you for sharing. I actually don't know if, even though you and I know each other so well, we've ever had the conversation that I also couldn't read in grade 2. It was actually discovered in grade 3 because I had learned to memorize so well that everyone thought I learned to read early. But
it's super common. It's like learning disabilities. If I look back now, I was very fortunate to have a family that could support. Like I was in intense tutoring 3 to 4 times a week for the first through like the 3 years in elementary school that followed. And I don't speak about them if you want to, but looking back, I'm like, wow, there were so many people who just didn't they didn't have the framework to be identified, or they didn't have the resources or they didn't want to acknowledge it themselves. It's much more common than some people think.
Well, and it's to the point, I think, and this is what I would love to dig into. I think there is a level of ingenuity and creativity and coping mechanisms. You and I are both very high achieving women. We've really charted our own path in a lot of different ways. And obviously there's an element of our character that's just, looking back, I think probably for both of us, that was there early on, right? So I had managed before most people can read, figuring out that I could memorize So I learned to memorize, which meant nobody knew I couldn't read. I was a crazy perfectionist. So the way that it came out was I was in grade 3. I was in actually a gifted program because I'd had other issues and my parents freaked out and got me tested. So I almost got failed in kindergarten because I wasn't good at following the rules. Because my parents were like, oh my goodness. And to your point, fortunately, I had parents who were like, oh, there are resources for this, and found a place to get me tested. And they said, okay, no, she's actually on this area, she's really strong. She's just bored and she needs a different environment that's not quite as rigid. I went to a real strict school system. And so I went to the gifted program, which came with its own set of challenges. And then, of course, by grade 3, I was a crazy perfectionist who couldn't read. So I couldn't really do my work in school. And it was coming home. Yes, definitely not like that at all anymore. So I was coming home with hours and hours of homework at the age of 8, 4 or 5 hours of homework. Because basically my whole days of school, I was bringing it home and trying to get it done. To your point, what I was going to say is what it did make me great at was pattern recognition, math, numbers. And even though I was fortunate, I would say overcome the reading issue relatively quickly. By probably grade 4, I was couldn't get enough of reading and loved it and was just, that's still what I'll do. If you give me a holiday day by the pool with nothing to do, I'll just read an entire book. And it makes me so happy. But to your point, yeah, I still all the way through into my first 10 years of my career would have told you I'm a numbers person, not a words person, and not a people person. So we build these beliefs about ourselves.
Exactly.
But we also build coping mechanisms, not even intentionally, right? I learned to recognize patterns, memorize, because I couldn't read. And I'm curious whether you have any of those kind of reflections about yourself.
I'll talk about a toolbox. I don't love this negative connotation around different ways of working, because that's essentially what it is. The way schools, education, academia, society has been shaped up is that everyone works this way, and if you don't, you're other. But that's really not what it is. I always say in another life, I wish I'd go back and reform the education system. So, 100%. Maybe when therapy to kind of reach where I'm happy, where my current goal, we'll see. But yeah, I call it a toolbox, and I'm really grateful for it. I think it's a result of it. I think differently. I analyze things differently. I come to it differently. Yeah, I feel like it's my greatest asset. But I've also been empowered by it. And I do think that was the way by which my parents chose to manage and deal with that news that I couldn't read, and how they chose for me to do it through my elementary, high school, and then all the way into Bishop and then at McGill, which was now a joint decision of how I wanted to go about it. And I would say something's got to give, where no one's perfect. Every brain and the way we process it, our emotions, everything is different. And I don't know, some of the best minds in the world have very stability. So I like to remember that little nugget.
It is wildly common in entrepreneurship. And that's part of why I was so excited to have you come on here, because I think there is an element of thinking differently, right? To your point, it's just about how you look at it. Thinking differently, seeing things differently, coming from a different angle. That is how you change the world, let alone build new ideas and new businesses, right?
Yeah, and it's hard to. It's not easy to and do that differently. But when that's all, and you have will and perseverance, where I think that it's hard. So if you're willing and persistent and get the support that you need, and the support can look like many different things for different people. It's all based on the individual in terms of what support they do or don't need, right? Some people would prefer to do it solo. So yeah, it's my biggest asset.
I love it. I'm wondering, you work in a really cutting edge and competitive space that's always evolving really rapidly. Does thinking differently maybe help you to not feel bound by the rules and to push the boundaries?
Totally. I put people in my role and I love it. So I'm not from a lot of agencies are started by an individual who's again, this is not for everyone, but a lot of them have started by they worked at an agency, have some framework, and then they're like, wait, I can do this better on my own. And then they go out and do that, and potentially they'll take a couple clients or opportunities or team members with them that they have the best synergy. I can wanted to do better, have more with. So I didn't start an agency. So I do feel like from an agency, more specifically marketing perspective, I don't have these conceived notions about how it should and shouldn't be done. So that's a very strong competitive advantage for me and therefore Serotina. I do have team members who are from agency, from brands, across the gamut. But at least for me, as a leader, I do think that helps me break down or get to the solution independent of what has already been, what current or existing approaches exist. And then I think, like myself as an entrepreneur, my biggest strength with something I've really had to make sure I keep in line is I'm always looking at something like, okay, how do I solve this? What's a better way to solve this? How can we optimize how we solve this? And some of our products are Serotina, playbooks, toolkits, content calendars, not just the actual delivery and the product itself, but how do we get from the debrief from the client, go into our internal methodology and back out to the client? I'm always looking about how to optimize that. For an agency, it's great and it's very exciting, at least for me, but it's really hard for a team to constantly be iterating a process that they're trying to perfect. And then they're constantly having to learn, which can curve out getting things really good and perfecting it. There's always that like fine line between being a generalist or a specialist and what has to compromise along the way. Again, because we're all human. So I think those two different things have allowed me to think differently. And then there's the learning disability. And then sometimes thinking differently isn't a competitive advantage, right? It creates more work. It creates noise. But sometimes I'm like, oh no, tone it down. This isn't necessary right now. And I have great people around me who can be really honest and direct with me, even though I am their boss or the leader, and shut this down. But it's exactly not for me, but for everyone else, like move on. And ultimately it is my end decision. But I'm so grateful that I have people around me that will be like, no.
Amazing points. I just want to highlight for everyone listening. There is a place for understanding best practice and leveraging things that work. And there is a place for innovating, doing it differently, breaking the mold. And actually the nuance of knowing when to go each way is absolutely an art and something that an intuition that you develop over time. And having sounding boards, having people in your businesses and a really open communication where everyone understands the mission and wants the best for the organization and can bring their perspectives to the table and respectfully hash it out, I think is absolutely a strength and a differentiator and a key to a successful business. I think most of us will agree that like the command and control leader of like what I say goes is not the best for an innovative company and definitely also not the best for engaging the current generation of workforce. I think that I can relate.
Yeah, and who wants to be told no all the time or who wants to be shut down and hired. And I have a strong personality. I know that like I have to be really mindful that sometimes I can be direct or like very focused. So I know I need to be self-aware enough. Like, hold on, listen, mute myself. I'll just talk on top of people, which is like not cute. Self-awareness, I think, is another one for entrepreneurs or leaders.
That's the big one for me. I'm always saying it. To me, it's the foundation for all the other things. Because if you aren't self-aware, then you can't do the work on the other parts of your leadership. Really, can't really figure out what they are. Or you're not going to listen to anyone else.
Yeah.
I know when you worked with Patio, right? We collaborated, Patio Serotina, in a very different way. I would say we were using also cutting edge technology, cutting edge concepts, using tech in a off-label, to use a medical term, manner of gaming tech for business development, business opportunities, training, marketing, all kinds of things. And we had to do a lot of education with our clients to help them understand the tech we used, the applications, and the possibilities. Do you find that in your business?
Totally. Like I said earlier, everyone's got an opinion and a preference for social media because it's such an easy, it's so accessible, but so much education. I think the biggest part from the like client service or customer service, account management, or whatever you want to call it, but like the way that we deliver the product, so much of it's so important for us to give rationale in terms of like why we're doing that. Because we have a lot that we're looking at data, and the social media is really emotional. Like data might say one thing. I'm a trained scientist. You can make data say anything you want. So even though the numbers true,
Oh, I know. I
data,
just look at every
data
health
will-
pad that's backed up by research. You can always find a study.
And if you have a lot of money, you can make bigger data pools. So again, that's a whole other podcast or live topic. But social media is really emotional, and a lot of the job of myself with some of the clients and the team is making sure that rationale is there and understood, and then they have to trust us in a way. Social media is a place that, like, if stuff goes up, you can edit it, but the bigger the brand, the more quick things are going to be seen, the less time you have to edit something that's been put out there. Yeah, there's a lot of education that comes, even though social media is accessible, and I would say 95% of our clients are on it. But that's also one thing we encourage them. For example, if we're going to build you out a TikTok strategy, we're going to manage a TikTok, and the founder, usually the key to decision making is somewhat gets it. If they're not on it, I strongly encourage them to do that, not necessarily to create and execute content, but consume content. And then, as we also mentioned, social media is incredibly dynamic. It's always changing. It's never been so rich in product, like social media. All these platforms have so many different products, and now most people would know this, but now they'll have different user pools within the same country, within the same, your Instagram framework might look different than mine, but yeah, we both have to market you the way you perceive stories, the way reels show up. So it's so dynamic, it's so changing. So we're constantly having to guide them through that in the way that we present them the product.
I love that. And your mission is to help business become brand through social media strategy installation. So maybe to frame, as we're going to dig a little bit more into this, what kind of businesses do you work with?
Yeah. So from the early days, we were really agnostic in terms of what businesses we went after, and that's really been a competitive advantage for us, because we don't have this turnkey approach, or we're not really funneled into one industry or one category. Yes, we do a lot of work in consumer packaged goods, food and beverage, beauty and wellness, but we do work in psychedelics. We do work in professional medical grade products. We do work in banks, fintech. Like, we really are wide, and it's great for us and the team, and then for our clients, because at the end of the day, the consumer of content on social is also experiencing all these things. Very few people on social media only have one type of content, even if it's a professional network for them. They as individuals are vast. They have a lot of interest, and it expands. It's the way I want the company to continue and not focus on one industry. Naturally, through sales and business development, we are targeting certain industries and categories, because that's strategically a better way to go about it than ad hoc. But that's the big pillar of our methodology, because our methodology is focused on brand. It's not focused on industry.
There's a lot to be said for being able to draw a correlation as well. You can actually sometimes come up with a really innovative standout strategy or approach by looking at another industry. So I think there's a lot of that you get to bring to your clients who are experts in their industry, right? I know for myself, I worked heavily in mining for a huge amount of my corporate career. And we would always tell our clients, don't look at your top of the pack mining peer. Look at oil and gas. They're 5 to 10 years ahead in technology, operations, all the things. So if you really want to innovate, draw some insights and inspiration from there.
Yeah, I think that word is it. Be inspired. There's a reason why you started a business. It's because you do something different or better. So why would you only look to everyone who's already doing it as your inspiration? No. And that's really important to our approach.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit about what your clients or businesses in general need to understand when they're thinking about social media as part of building the brand or their marketing strategy. Is social media alone? Is that it? Can you just develop a content plan and run with it? Or I'm guessing it's a bit more complicated.
Totally. It really depends on the business and the business objectives. And what I think is also really important and not often acknowledge enough is that the leadership, whether it's C-suite or a founder, or what's their headspace, what do they understand, what do they like, what do they not like? And because if you have an edge towards social media, you're never going to love this for you. So let's be mindful of that and make social media appropriate for what you want it to do for your business. So it's never just social media, but how much social media or what social media looks like for you to be based on what the business objectives are. But again, I think it's really important to look at the founder and leadership, but then also what the operational chart looks like now or what you want it to be. Because if you're working with us, you're trying to grow your business, and we're with you to grow your brand. So let's take it honest. So therefore you have growth spreads, or you should. Given you don't, then we're gonna have a false start. But if we're gonna look at that together, let's be honest about what you and your current team or leadership are comfortable and willing to oversee confidently. And so let's build into that and grow that together as opposed to anything else.
Can you maybe give an example of what would be different if, let's say, to your point, a founder has a disinclination towards social media as opposed to somebody who's really gung-ho about it? Like, how would that really change your recommendation?
It doesn't make it any easier or harder. Let's be clear. One thing that we really look to do, content is really important for social. Like that's really all it is. It's content deployment. And there's different content formats, copy, there's different mediums. That's the word I like to use, right? From video to static to copy, sound, texture, like all the things, right? We like to look at a business and be honest with what resources or budget allow from a content production. And then we do a lot of work for evergreen type content. So we work with a lot of clients that are like, how do you want to talk about your brand consistency month over month, year over year? And then what resources do we need to do are better sustainable in your current phase or the phase 2 or phase 3 in order to have a sustainable social media presence, right? Because TikTok and videos are all the rage, but we all know one of the biggest challenges in our industry is to deliver a product, a video that's of 6 seconds, that's of high quality, that's cost effective to a business. Yes, there's many different ways. You could probably get them for 50 cents, but some of the brand work that's needed and the quality control that go around, an average reel cost can go up quite significantly from that. So
Right.
That's what we like to do from the evergreen spot. And there's always the campaign side or the product launch, or there's everything that's like a little bit more promotional or specific to an initiative that may have different needs, resources, etc. But we like to look at those two things, yes, together, but also separate to identify what's going to be the best for the business. That's going to be the best for us. We set you up on a TikTok and LinkedIn strategy, and the expectation is to have a video every day, but it's going to be pulling teeth to get that or require financing that your business can't withstand. That's not going to get you the results or set you up for. It's going to create more stress. It's going to create, we're not going to have anything to work with, and it's a false start.
Amazing. I love that. Like understanding all of the variables, and that resources spans quite a lot of different components as well. It's not just money, but it's time, attention, bandwidth, talent. Yeah.
If you already have a relationship with someone you trust and who's really great at graphic design, are they going to make the best social media content? Because they do all graphic design. I think that's one thing that's really misunderstood, is that how creative can be done, period, but then how it can be done for social media. There's a real, that's probably one of the biggest things we have to learn against. But if you have a relationship that we can benefit from together, again, I said about collaboration, why wouldn't we utilize that as best we can? And if it doesn't work, then we can iterate.
Yeah. And there's two things you touched on there. I'd love to talk more. One is just what are some misconceptions, but the other that maybe we don't even talk about it, I just want to call it out, was I think when you have the best interest of your client at heart, it's just such a good foundation for business that, you're not driving to get the biggest share of your client's wallet. You're driving to how can we mutually support your success? Because that is going to proliferate into them becoming a bigger client for you and speaking your praises to others. And I think that can be something that as a leader, you struggle, not you specifically, with, but I need to grow or get the most or do the most or do everything or control everything, which of course the control over it can be a hard one because you want to control the quality. But I love that you came back to that collaboration, because I think that's a point that is so important within your organization. But if it is a value, it actually extends to your client. And that's true for all values typically. It's, if I show up as an employee, this is how I'm expected to behave. This is also what I should experience from my peers. And as a client coming in, that is the experience I should have as well. I love that. Are there other common misconceptions? Obviously, if someone works with you, they're going to go deep, they're going to get custom tailored advice. But just for someone who's listening now and trying to figure out how social media works for their business.
Yeah, it's easy, or that it's not time consuming. Social media requires a lot of work, and time again, we have a privilege of seeing so many data points, qualitative and quantitative. But time and time again, it's quality content over time, like consistently over time, that shows to social media growth, which will then show business growth. If you're trying to hit a quota for a number of posts per month, your KPI is producing content, not producing valuable content. And if there's so much noise out there, there's so much content out there, if you want to stand out, you have to deliver as much value in that piece of content as possible. I'm not saying it's easy. And sometimes, again, for myself, for example, I just launched on TikTok myself. It's new, it's a bit wild, but I'm just going off the cuff, and whatever I feel like I want to talk about. Mind you, the team is doing all the production for me, which, thank goodness, at the beginning, I was trying to do it because I need to know the products that we're selling. So I was like, whoa, and it's going to be done. Really, again, there is an approach on TikTok where you don't care if there's typos. If you don't care, that's not my brand. That's really important to me. It goes along with my learning disability, because for years it's such a struggle, but we're still in the struggle, I should say. Yeah, to answer your question, the two misconceptions are that it's easy and it doesn't take a lot of time. From every client, from brands that I've had the privilege to work with that are over 100 million in revenue, from $500,000 a year. And there's just this, and at a time, maybe it was, but we are no longer there.
Yeah. I love that you said the consistent quality over time. I think even from a general business perspective, understanding what the metrics you set and the behaviors they're driving. And I've had actually a lot of conversations with different businesses this week about that. We can set metrics that we think are going to drive success, but they will sometimes drive behaviors that are actually suboptimal. And to your point, the consistency. So putting out great content for a month or 2 months or 3 months is not sufficient in most cases. Maybe you make a splash, but even from my own experience, it was a year of consistent content and refining and learning and looking at, what was most helpful, and also understanding what my goal with my content was, to really feel like I got to a place where I now had the clarity and it is massively time consuming, even with support, to your point. I'm curious, what you touched on made me question, there's a really significant rise in professional content creators and monetization of these platforms of social media. Do you think that small businesses are getting pushed out? Is there a risk, or do people ask you whether it's even worth using the platforms to compete for attention when there's so much professional, expensive content going out there? If I don't have $1 million a year to spend on social media marketing, should I even bother?
100%. If you don't have a website or a social account, it's really hard to trust a brand in that position. Again, it depends on your business, right? My mother, McDonald's, she doesn't work, and she works, the nature of her business doesn't require such a significant brand presence for her company. They don't have an Instagram account, and I would professionally never advise them to do that. They can if they want, sure. It's just so fun. It's around my spot. It really depends on the business and what they're looking, to your point, what you're looking to achieve out of it. But it's really a place to build trust and community around your brand. I know that word community has a little bit of an edge in the way it's been used or it's been abused. And so social media was created, I think Kevin, the founder of Instagram, I think he's brilliant. And really the place was created to, Instagram specifically, was to really set some standards for social media platforms that are now coming out. But it was really created to share images with your close friends. Like it wasn't made for anything more than that. Twitter, it was created to find your friends on, like, it was very simple and was very fun. It wasn't more than it needed to be. Naturally, it's become much more than that now. But for sure, again, going to what I said earlier, appreciate where you are, appreciate what you can do confidently and consistently, and work within that framework. And then when your business grows or you grow or your bandwidth grows or, your objectives change, you adjust.
I love that. So I want to be mindful of your time. I've got a few wrap-up questions that I love to ask. They are rapid fire. They're for people to get to know you. You can absolutely pass on any of them if something doesn't come to mind. So the first one, is there an experience that changed your life?
Oh gosh, not kidding. Yeah, many.
Yeah. Is there anyone that you've
shared? No? All right.
Next.
What? Yeah, I don't even know. I think learning disability, that's obviously a big part of my identity, and I've worked around that, but I think that, and I'll leave it at that. All right.
What does the word strategy mean to you?
Oh, goodness. Part of it is tactic, but a lot of it is approach. I think it's like if you know the scientific method, you have a hypothesis, you build out an experiment, then you test that experiment, you have data points, and then you draw a conclusion. But that conclusion doesn't always have to say the strategy or the experiment was right. So I put strategy and experiment to that same level because that's really what they are. But you really have to see then your metrics, both quantitative and qualitative, is this strategy achieving the goals and objectives I've set out for it? If not, let's change. And it might be an overhaul or it might be fine tuning. That's why it's so dynamic and iterative, social, and I love it. For me, a strategy is a proposed experiment.
I love it. Is there a book you've read that has changed your perspective on something?
Peak Performance. Yeah, that one I keep coming back to. And the concept is simple. Stress plus rest equals success. And success, whether that's physical success, emotional success, professional success. And the book just takes you across many different examples of that in different contexts, like I just described. I strongly recommend that one for anyone.
Is that's Stephen Kohler, I think? If not, he has a book by the same name. He has a series of them. You can always link that in the show notes. Last question. If you could go to any concert tomorrow, touring or not, dead or alive,
Strongly be.
like,
I don't know. I really love music, specifically live music across like many genres, and I've been fortunate to see some incredible people from like the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, Paul McCartney. Holy moly! Even Michael Jackson. I never saw him, and growing up, he was quite like I hear those songs, and it was really in my childhood. And when he was probably the first like celebrity that died, and I felt it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was on a good show. He was known for performing.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll change that answer when we get off. No, that's what I'm going with.
All good. Is there anything you would like to leave listeners or looking back, young entrepreneur Daphne, with as we wrap up the conversation in terms of the insights and learnings that you've had over the years?
Yeah, one thing that's been really interesting is I've been a bit more vocal. I've never hid my learning disability, but I'm just a bit more forward with it, and especially if I'm sending a very sensitive communication, and unfortunately no one can prove it for me, which is what, in my toolbox, I have someone on my team who just like proves every written communication I write. I'm permitting. I'll just lead with it. So I think leading with my learning disability has really empowered me. But what I'm noticing is so many people that I guess the opportunity to meet or work with personally and professionally, their children or their cousins or they're like, oh my God, you've been able to achieve this. It's really scary for a parent. I mean, my parents were told multiple times that I would be no more than they had to manage some expectations about what I could accomplish. Parents are both driven individual, and more than one had more vividly than my mom recall being cautioned against what I would be able to achieve. And yeah, I'm more than happy to make this. I can only share through my experience, but I'm more than happy to make myself available to anyone who, whether it's a parent or an individual, no matter where they are in that journey, to let them know about my experience or my toolbox or the resources I had or the approaches I've taken. Because I think a lot more people struggle with this than we know. I'm grateful to see there's a lot more open dialogue about it, but it's still not where it could be. So yeah, my door, my DMs, my phone number, all the things, I'm here to talk about it. I can help someone else in the way I was helped. That would be amazing.
I think that's such a great point. And what you said, it's always a bit of a double-edged sword. It is a great thing that we understand a lot more about a whole spectrum of challenges or differences. And at the same time, we want to make sure that labeling people isn't constraining their potential, because it is absolutely terrible to grow up being told that you aren't going to be able to do what you want to do, or that you won't amount to anything. That's an old-fashioned term, but I love that you're there and willing to support. And because, yeah, it's the individual, but also, like you said, those who care about them. How can they support? If you can't relate, it can be really difficult. So to your point, being available, Serotina as a company, you as this phenomenal entrepreneur, where can people connect if they want to continue the conversation or inquire about Serotina?
My LinkedIn, my Instagram, Daphne J. Barron. I'm pretty accessible at any of those two places. I'm on all my comms. And my email, daphne@serotinamedia.com, all the way.
Amazing. Daphne, I'm so grateful. Your energy is always so contagious. I knew that this would be an incredible episode. So thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing so openly, and look forward to connecting again soon.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, we're way out of date, but we'll make up for that.
We absolutely are. Amazing. And thank you so much to everyone who joined us.
Thanks for tuning in. Our goal is to create connections and inspire conversations about building great companies. So please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast with your network. Sharing is caring. If you're a business leader or executive team ready to take your leadership and company to the next level with high-performing teams, we'd love to see how we can rocket fuel your growth. Check out the show notes to book your free Builders Business Booster call, where you'll receive a strategic leadership assessment and 3 concrete focus areas to mature and grow your business. You'll also find the link to join the Builders Club to stay up to date on upcoming events, get valuable tools and insights, as well as be the first to receive exciting announcements straight to your inbox. No spam, I promise. You'll also find my website, alexsnyder.com, and all the places to peep my creds, hear what clients have to say, and see if I went to the gym today. And one final note, this podcast is not intended to be legal, tax, or other professional advice. Thanks for joining. We'll catch you on the flip side.